I didn't expect her voice to sound like that, low, certain, almost like a secret only meant for me. She said, "It's only us here." And before I could stop myself, I teased back, exactly how I wanted it. The words slipped out too easily, like I'd been waiting for her to hand me that moment. I tried to laugh it off, but it stayed in the air, heavier than either of us wanted to admit. We were in the workshop after closing, the kind of place where time slows down. Metal shelves lined with parts, the faint smell of oil and dust. I'd stayed late because of a repair I hadn't finished, but she was the reason I wasn't hurrying. She wasn't supposed to be there that long. The owner's sister, mid-40s, smart, unbothered by the noise of tools or the grit on the floor. Most people here spoke in quick, clipped sentences, but she never rushed her words. She carried herself with this quiet assurance, as if nothing in the room could touch her unless she let it. She leaned against the counter now, not looking at me at first, pretending to check something on her phone. But I caught the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, slow, deliberate, like she knew I'd notice. And of course I did. "Shouldn't you be heading home?" I asked, forcing casualness into my voice, though my hands wouldn't stop fidgeting with the wrench. She looked up then, steady eyes meeting mine for a moment longer than necessary. "And leave you alone here?" A small smile played at her lips. Not safe. It wasn't the words, really, it was how she said them, as if she knew exactly the effect they'd have. My throat felt dry, and I set the wrench down a little too loudly. We both heard it. The clank echoed, followed by silence. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that makes you suddenly aware of everything. Her breathing, the scrape of her shoes on the floor, the way the fluorescent lights buzzed above us. I wanted to fill it with something, anything, but the weight of her presence made me hesitate. I wasn't sure if speaking would break the spell or make it worse. Instead, she broke it first. She stepped closer. Not much, just enough to hand me a rag I hadn't asked for. Our fingers brushed so lightly it could have been nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not to me. Her perfume lingered, faint but impossible to ignore, weaving into the grease and dust of the shop like it didn't belong there. She didn't belong there either, and yet she made the whole place feel different. "You're distracted," she said softly, not accusing, more like observing. I swallowed, unsure whether to deny it or laugh it off. "Maybe," was all I managed. Her smile deepened, like she'd gotten the answer she expected. She turned away before I could read more into it, leaving me staring at the curve of her shoulder, the certainty in her walk, the quiet power she carried even in a dim, greasy shop. That should have been the end of it. Just a small exchange in a place too ordinary to matter. But it wasn't. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. Momentum. The next day, I tried to convince myself that the night before hadn't meant anything. Just a slip of words, an accident carried by silence. But when she walked into the shop again, everything I'd buried came rushing back like I hadn't even tried. She wasn't supposed to be here during work hours. Normally, she came in the evenings, checking in on her brother, dropping off paperwork, or just lingering in ways I couldn't name. But this time she carried a small box under her arm, something personal. "Could you help me with this?" she asked, setting it gently on the counter. Her tone was casual, but her eyes stayed on me longer than the request needed. I nodded, wiping my hands on my coveralls before lifting the lid. Inside was an old clock, brass edges worn, the kind of thing you don't repair unless it means something. "It was my father's," she said quietly, almost like she regretted admitting it. "Doesn't run anymore. I've been holding onto it." Her voice shifted lower, softer, vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard before. I glanced up, but she was already looking past me, her fingers tapping lightly against the counter like she was trying to mask what slipped out. I wanted to ask more. Why now? Why bring it to me? But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I busied myself with the clock, pretending to study the gears though my eyes kept drifting to her reflection in the glass case behind her. Her hair was pinned back today, but a loose strand fell forward, brushing her cheek. She didn't push it away, and I caught myself thinking how easily I could. Dangerous thought. Too dangerous. She wasn't just older, she was connected. She had history, weight, a presence that filled the room in ways I didn't know how to step around. And me? I was just the guy behind the counter, hands stained with grease, trying not to betray the fact that every second near her felt like trespassing. "Can you fix it?" she asked finally, pulling me back. I swallowed. "I think so, but it'll take time." Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "I can wait." The way she said it made the air tighten between us again, like she wasn't just talking about the clock. I bent over the mechanism, trying to slow my heartbeat, but her nearness pressed against me all the same. She leaned over too, watching my hands work, close enough that I felt the warmth of her arm brush mine. "Your hands are steady," she murmured, almost to herself. I froze, the screwdriver slipping slightly. Did she know what she'd just done to me with those 4 words? I didn't answer. Couldn't. The silence stretched, filled with everything we weren't saying. And then, lightly, almost nothing, her fingers touched my forearm. Just a second. Enough to send a jolt through me. "Stay a little longer after you finish," she said, her voice softer now, nearly a whisper. "I'd like the company." I almost told her yes too quickly. Almost told her more than I should have. Pressure. I stayed later than I should have. The shop had gone quiet, the others long gone, leaving only the 2 of us under the harsh buzz of the overhead lights. The clock lay open on the counter between us, its gears scattered like secrets I wasn't supposed to see. She watched me work, leaning closer than was necessary. It was distracting the way her presence bent the space. Every time I tried to retreat into the rhythm of tools and screws, I caught the curve of her smile, the shift of her breath, the softness in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. "You're careful," she said suddenly. "Most people rush through things. You don't." It was too much, her noticing me like that. My hands hesitated, trembling against the screwdriver. I wanted to laugh it off, deflect, but the weight of her words pinned me in place. "Maybe I don't want to break something important," I murmured, not sure if I was still talking about the clock. Her eyes lingered on me. For a second, it felt like she heard exactly what I meant, and I couldn't breathe. She moved closer, her sleeve brushing mine. Then, an accident, maybe not, her hand rested on my wrist as I adjusted a gear. Warmth spread through me, unwelcome and undeniable. "Sorry," she whispered, pulling back, though the apology came too late. The touch had already burned its imprint. I opened my mouth. God knows what would have come out, but before I could, her phone rang. The sound shattered the moment. She flinched, turned away, fumbling it out of her bag. Her voice shifted when she answered, cool, detached, professional. She paced as she spoke, the words muffled but urgent. Whoever was on the other end had her full attention, but I couldn't stop watching the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers curled tightly around the phone. When she hung up, she stayed still for a moment, her back to me. Then she exhaled, shoulders sagging in a way I'd never seen. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly. She turned, her face composed again, but her eyes gave her away. Tired, guarded, almost fragile. "Just complicated." I wanted to ask more, wanted to step closer, close the distance she'd built again. Instead, I forced my eyes back to the clock, pretending to be busy. But she didn't let me. She came back to the counter, closer than before, her hand brushing against mine again as she set the phone down. "You don't have to act like you didn't hear," she said softly. "I know you did." I froze. There was no safe answer. Every word felt like a step onto thin ice. Her gaze held mine, steady, unblinking. The silence swelled until I felt it pressing against my chest. I should have pulled back, Should have cracked a joke, created distance. But instead, I stayed. Her fingers grazed mine again, no accident this time. Deliberate. Slow. And for a breathless second, I thought she might close the space entirely. Ending beat that leaves the air heavy with possibility. The shop felt smaller that night, as if the walls had shifted closer, pressing us together. The clock sat finished on the counter, ticking faintly now, proof of my work. But she barely looked at it. Her eyes kept finding me instead. "You fixed it," she said softly, almost distracted. "Yeah." My voice sounded rougher than I meant. "Runs like new." But she didn't thank me. She didn't even move closer to the clock. She stayed where she was, arms folded, gaze steady. There was something in it I couldn't read. Tiredness, longing, maybe both. "Why do you stay so late?" she asked suddenly. I tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin. "Work to finish." Her head tilted. "That's not the reason." Her words landed harder than I expected. I should have denied it, brushed it off, but the silence stretched until my throat burned. She stepped closer, each movement deliberate, as if she'd already decided what this night was meant to be. "You think I don't notice?" she continued, her voice lower now. "The way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention?" My chest tightened. Every excuse I'd rehearsed in my head dissolved. I didn't know whether to apologize, defend myself, or admit everything. Instead, I whispered, "You're not easy to ignore." It hung between us, too raw, too honest. I wished I could take it back, but her expression didn't harden. If anything, it softened, as though she'd been waiting for it. Her arms unfolded. She came closer, so close I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. The way her lips parted just slightly as if words sat on the edge. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "Then stop giving me reasons to." I didn't recognize my own voice. It sounded braver than I felt, reckless even. But I couldn't look away from her. Not when her gaze locked onto mine. Not when everything else in the world seemed to fall silent except for the rhythm of her breathing. Her hand lifted as if to touch my face, then hesitated mid-air. She let it fall back to her side, fingers curling tight. We stood there, suspended in something fragile and dangerous, neither of us crossing the line but both of us standing right on the edge of it. "I shouldn't be here," she said, though she didn't move. "Then why are you?" She didn't answer, not with words, just her eyes, searching mine, heavy with something I couldn't name. The clock ticked in the background, steady and cruel. Finally, she whispered, "What happens if we stop pretending?" The question landed like a strike, leaving the air thick and unbreathable. I didn't answer, couldn't. I just stared back at her, my pulse loud in my ears, knowing everything might change with whatever came next. Been building toward. The next day, she didn't show up. I told myself it was nothing, that she was busy, that life had pulled her elsewhere. But the absence gnawed at me, hollowing out every hour. When she finally walked in again, 2 days later, the air shifted instantly. She wasn't her usual self. No quiet confidence, no teasing edge. Her shoulders were stiff, her eyes carrying a weight I hadn't seen before. "You fixed the clock," she said, glancing at it on the shelf. Her voice was flat, like the words didn't belong to her. "Yeah," I answered carefully. "Been waiting for you to pick it up." She nodded but didn't move closer. She stood at the doorway, one hand gripping the frame as if she needed it to stay steady. Something in me tensed. "What happened?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a moment I thought she'd brush it off. But instead, she exhaled slowly, her control slipping. "My ex called." The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. She stepped in further, lowering her bag onto the counter. "He knows I've been coming here." He asked questions. My throat tightened. "About me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she ran her hand along the counter's edge, her fingers tracing invisible lines. Finally, "He remembers you." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "Remembers me?" She looked up then, her gaze steady despite the tremor in her voice. "From years ago, you used to deliver parts to his garage. He told me." The memory slammed into me. Barely a few visits when I was younger, running errands, his irritated voice echoing across the space. I hadn't thought of it since, but now it bound us in a way I hadn't seen coming. "He asked if I was involved," she continued, her voice catching on the last word. "I told him no, that you're just helping me." Her eyes searched mine, daring me to challenge it. Couldn't. My pulse hammered, my mind spinning. The line we'd been dancing around suddenly felt sharper, more dangerous. "Does it matter what he thinks?" I asked, though I wasn't sure if I wanted the answer. She closed her eyes for a moment, her hand pressed flat on the counter as if grounding herself. "It matters if he tells people. If this place becomes something to gossip about." Her vulnerability cut deeper than her words. For the first time, I saw fear there, not of him, but of what being seen together might mean. I stepped closer before I could stop myself. "Then let them talk." Her eyes snapped open, startled, like she hadn't expected me to say it. For a moment, the tension broke. Something raw flickered across her face, half regret, half relief. But then her phone buzzed again, vibrating against the counter, dragging us back. She didn't pick it up. She just stared at me, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Instead, she whispered, almost broken, "You don't know what you're risking." And in that silence I realized I already had. Raw and human. The shop was nearly dark when she returned that night. No warning, no text. Just the sound of the door creaking open and her figure framed in the doorway, carrying the weight of every silence we'd left between us. I was sweeping the floor, but I froze, broom midair. She stepped in, her heels muted against the concrete, her expression unreadable. "You're still here," she said softly. "I could say the same about you." My voice was steadier than I felt. For a long moment, she didn't move. The air between us was brittle, as if one wrong word could shatter it completely. Then she walked closer, setting her bag down on the counter, her eyes fixed on me. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered. My chest tightened. "Doing what?" "This." Her hand lifted, gesturing vaguely at the space between us, the unspoken current that had been building for weeks. "These late nights, the way you look at me, the way I—" She cut herself off, shaking her head. The words I'd been swallowing burned to be free. "Then say it. Just once. So we don't have to pretend anymore." Her gaze snapped to mine, sharp and searching. "And what happens if I do?" I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. The broom slipped from my fingers, clattering to the ground, but neither of us flinched. Finally, I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint tremor in her hands, the way her breathing quickened. Then maybe I stop wondering if I'm the only one who feels it. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Instead, she reached for the clock on the counter, the one I'd fixed for her, and held it tightly to her chest, like it was a shield. "My father used to say some things aren't meant to be touched," she murmured. "That once you cross a line, you can't go back." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "And what if not crossing it feels worse?" The question cracked something open. She set the clock down carefully, as though her hands weren't shaking. Then, almost against her will, she stepped into my space. Her hand brushed my arm, light, trembling, but deliberate. My heart surged, every reason to pull back colliding with the truth I couldn't hold in anymore. "I shouldn't want this," she said, her voice breaking. "Neither should I." The silence that followed was different this time. Not heavy, not suffocating. It was raw, alive, charged with everything we'd been holding back. And then she looked at me, really looked at me, as though stripping away every layer of denial we'd built. "I don't know where this goes," she whispered. "Me neither," I admitted. "But I know I'll regret it if I walk away now." Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world held still, waiting for her answer. She didn't speak. She just let her hand linger on my arm, her eyes locked on mine, and in that fragile contact, the decision was made. Even if we didn't dare say it out loud. Viewer engagement prompts. The days that followed felt different, quieter, heavier, as though the shop itself had absorbed what happened between us. Nothing was spoken aloud, but everything had changed. She still came by. Not every day, not in the same ways as before, but enough to let me know she hadn't walked away. Sometimes she'd linger in silence. Sometimes she'd ask about small repairs that didn't really need her attention. Other times, she'd simply sit, watching me work, the distance between us thick with what we both now carried. The clock she'd brought in was gone. She'd taken it home, yet I noticed she never stopped mentioning it, as if it wasn't just an object, but a thread tying her father, her past, and now me together. We didn't confess anything the night of the touch. Not in words, but we'd both crossed into a place where pretending was impossible. And that, in itself, was its own confession. One evening, as I was locking up, she stood near the doorway, the light catching the faint tiredness in her eyes. She looked at me, steady, and said, "You've changed the way this place feels." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a declaration. But it meant more than either. She was admitting what I'd been afraid to believe, that I mattered, that she saw me, that I wasn't just some younger man circling around her life. I wanted to ask where this was going, if there was even a future in it. But when our eyes met, I realized that wasn't the point. Not tonight. The point was that we'd both chosen not to step back, not to erase the silence that held our truths. She reached out once more, this time without hesitation, resting her hand on my arm. A small gesture, quiet and steady. But in that touch, I felt all the words neither of us could say without breaking the fragile balance we'd found. Maybe it was forbidden. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe it was only ever meant to exist in moments like these, hidden, delicate, alive in the spaces between. But it was real. And for the first time, that was enough. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't about whether we crossed the line or not. It was about the way we'd seen each other, flawed, uncertain, carrying regrets, and how, somehow, we let that recognition change us. For her, maybe it was about remembering she could still be wanted. For me, it was about learning that sometimes the most important thing isn't the ending, but the risk of reaching out at all. That night, when I locked up the shop, I could still feel the echo of her touch on my arm. A reminder that some connections don't need to be defined to matter. They just need to be lived, however briefly, however imperfectly. And maybe that was enough of a story.